Okay, I have started my stream. That means that you are all being recorded against your will.
Oh shit.
Nope, no swearing on YouTube. I'm just kidding. Okay, I'll give people a few more minutes. Oh, and Sarah, you're going to be very happy about Agira.
Why is that?
Because we're going to do your strategy.
Perfect.
Yeah. I had Faded look into which one was optimal, and I'm like, well, stacking 2 and 2 is not a bad strategy, but it's not ideal. Oh my god, Dialia, three fragments in the bank. Yeah, I get that. That's why I don't do automatic like crafting region deposits, because it steals stuff from me that I don't even realize. Oh, 1 sec, I'll be right back. Okay, sorry, I'm back. One of my my wife and I are doing like self-made advent calendars for Christmas, and today was our first day. And what she got me today was she said she would play WoW with me on the nights that we were raiding, just kind of like casually behind me. And because of that, we had to re-download the game, and so my bandwidth was being throttled like crazy. But we should be good now.
You should get Starlink.
What's up?
You should get Starlink.
Starlink? Oh, it's
Yeah.
the Must thing. Well, okay, I think we're ready to get started. If everybody could just click into the screen share within Discord that I'm doing. All right, cool. So real quick, we're just going to go over all the bosses. Reminder that I really don't have much of an ego about this game, so if you have questions or if you want to correct me on something in terms of the strategy, that's totally fine. Like I said earlier, Faded did a fantastic job this week of making sure that for every boss, if we have to split into groups or if people have to be assigned specific mechanics, we're going to have that all taken care of so that I don't have to basically do it on the fly. So let's go ahead and get started. So Gnarl Root, I mean, do we even need to go over this fight? No, but we will. So Gnarl Root will stay in the middle the entire time. He will cast Flaming Pestilence, which is where he puts giant fire X throughout the raid. Those will spawn little seedlings that we then have to take the next soak mechanic over the seedlings in order to have them spawn into treants. We then group the treants together near the boss and burn them down. Treants are high priority. He also does a frontal cone, and then he also, let's see, does a raid-wide 10-second dot called Tortured Scream. This is one of the highest damage dealing parts of the encounter, so healers, if you do have any big cooldowns that you don't need to blow before this, you might as well save them. I was trying to work on like really detailed healer cooldowns this week, but I don't think that it's necessary at the difficulty we're at. But once we start getting stuck on specific mythic fights, I will have very detailed like cooldown requirements, or not requirements, but assignments for everybody, just so that we don't waste things. Intermission phase is when he spawns the giant roots that will cut the room in half. So we're not doing specific groups for this one, but just kind of make sure that you're spread evenly. And then you have to stand in the fire circle to get set on fire. It doesn't really deal that much damage, but then you just stand near the roots in order to burn them down. And then that is when we'll lust, because he goes into a damage amp phase where he just kind of sits there. The only other thing to call out during this is that you do not want to walk underneath him during the intermission or damage amp phase, because you will die. So that's it. Any questions? Cool. Simple fight. Okay. Agira. Again, not too difficult of a fight. We're going to do the positioning where the tanks will be facing the boss toward the back of the room, and then everyone else will just kind of loose stack in the front. But for the spears, we are going to change it up this week from previous weeks. So for the spears, we're going to do as tight of a stack under the boss as we can get without actually like overlapping, so that, you know, we don't stack 4 at the same time. But that'll help with the ability to burn them down. And once we do that, you know, those people can then go back to wherever they were before. Melee, if you are like super close to the boss during this portion, just get out while right before the spears actually end up dropping. And then once they drop, the puddles don't really deal that much damage, so you can get back in and then AoE them down as well as hitting the boss at the same time. But again, the spears are very high priority because they will lock whoever they're attached to in place. And the next mechanic after this is a knockback mechanic, and so if that happens, that whoever is attached to the chain will basically die. The boss also puts out these twisted blades. They are just dodgeable mechanics. However, do not try to cheese them if you're in melee range, because you can't. There's nowhere close enough to the boss you can stand that you would like cheese this strat. So if you do see them, just kind of get out of the way. The main mechanic is, of course, marked for Torment. We're going to go in a regular 1, 2, 3 order, so we're going to start with the axe. The axe mechanic is a giant soak will be put on the tank, and when that happens, half of the raid will need to soak with that tank. Again, we have assignments for this already, so you're just going to have to know who your tank is, whether it's Sarah or Faded, and once that happens, once you soak with that tank, you're going to get out, and then it'll happen again. And if you soaked the first time, you'll have a massive debuff on you that'll basically guarantee that you die if you soak again. So just make sure that if your tank is getting soaked, you soak with them, and if your tank is not getting the soak on them, to get the heck out of the way. The second mechanic down here is the sword, so that'll be the second thing that we soak. The sword is where Agira will jump to whoever the 2 furthest players are and create just a giant, you know, landing pad that you want to get out of, as well as when they land, these giant fire X's will spawn on the ground that they're just floor mechanics. Just get out of the way. And then the last one is the dagger. That's the one on the where are we? The one on the right here. And for that, is it a male or a female boss? I don't even know. Does anybody know?
It's a lady.
Okay, it was a feminine name, but the picture is throwing me off. So yeah, she will create a healing absorb on multiple players. The healing absorb has to be healed up, obviously, and then once the healing absorb is fully healed, those players will basically like radiate fireballs out from their body that have to be dodged. If the healing absorb is not healed, I think that person pretty much then that person puts out a massive AoE damage on the raid. So basically, easier to dodge these than it would be to take a crap ton of raid damage. And then that's pretty much the whole fight. Any questions? All right, back to Council. Council is a hectic fight, so no strong positioning requirements except from the tank. So we're just going to do some loose spreading to start. But as a reminder, only the bear is able to be tanked. The other two will just jump around and do whatever they want to do. So each boss has one normal mechanic and one ultimate mechanic. And so the bear's normal mechanic is that he does a charge. The charge will deal AoE damage at the end of the charge based on how many people did not soak it. So he also runs all the way through the tank. So you do not necessarily need to be between the tank and the bear. You just need to be within his line of charge, because he will charge from wherever he is all the way to the edge of the room. So if we call out group 1 or group 2, again, you'll know who you are. Just make sure that you are standing somewhere in his direct line, because otherwise we'll wipe. Just like the other mechanic, once you get a soak done, you'll get a dot on you, which means you can't soak the next one. So just make sure that we're swapping off and that you're paying attention to which group you're in. Related, all the bosses have a way to rock, paper, scissors the other bosses. So whenever whatever her name is, Arwen, decides to ult, she will basically put tendrils out on everybody and pull them in. The only way to prevent the wipe is to have the bear charge her, but during this charge we still need to soak the charge. Pip, or whatever his name is, will spawn flowers. The flowers will pulse AoE damage, which is not that big of a deal, but they will deal massive nature damage if you accidentally step into it, so do not step into it. However, Pip also turns random players into ducks. So all you have to do as a duck is run through 3 of the grass patches, 3 of the flowers, to eat them, cause them to disappear, and then you will be able to unduck yourself. The only requirement for unducking is that you do not unduck near another player, because if you do, you will polymorph them into a duck. The exception to this is that the only way to counter the bear's ultimate, where he goes into just like a pulsing frenzy, is to unduck next to him. So whenever the tank calls out, or whenever I guess Fated calls out that the bear tank is enraging, whoever is a duck, just run straight to the bear and make sure you get your unduck off. Pip's ultimate is that he puts a shield on everybody in the raid, and then starts to channel a song. The only way to get rid of the shield is to stand in one of the flowers. So we have to make sure that not every flower is gone, just most of them. And then once your shield is gone, it makes a little sound effect if you have your sounds turned on, and that signals that you need to get out of the grass, because if you keep standing in the grass, you will die, because the dot is still ticking. But if anybody still has the shield at the end of his channel, it will basically just kill you. So high priority. Pip's regular ability is that he jumps somewhere and then does like a big 3-second wind, knockback that you have to just walk through. The only real consideration here is to make sure that you do not get knocked into one of the flower patches, because again, probably will kill you. And then the bear will deal a tank buster that also turns into a cone, so the tanks will be pointing this one out of the raid. So the order for this is he'll do a tank buster that is pointed out of the raid, and then he will turn around and he will charge, and then everybody who's soaking the charge will get called on to soak, and then he will turn around, or the tank will point him out again for the cone, and then the charge happens, and then rinse and repeat. So that's pretty much it. The only other main mechanic to call out here is that the tanks will try to tank the bear near one of the other two, if at all possible, for the cleave benefit. And then all of the bosses have to die within, what is it? I think it's like 30 or 45 seconds of each other. So if one boss starts to get low, we have to just swap focus to the other ones. But we did this last week. It wasn't a big deal. Any questions? Cool. Loridar is next. Oh, geez. Okay. So Loridar is the one that spawns the treants and then turns us all into little firefighters. So we're going to start by taking him to the side of the room, and we're going to go around the room kind of clockwise. while this is happening, some treants will spawn. They have to be killed quickly. Treants are the absolute #1 damage priority for this. It doesn't even matter if we don't hit the boss during this phase, because the treants will absolutely kill us if we don't. So treants need to get grouped up near the boss and burned down immediately. I believe that they also can be interrupted, like they just kind of they channel a little bit and then deal some raid-wide damage. So if you do have a kick, make sure that you're kicking them on cooldown. And like I mentioned earlier, I got a subscription to wipefest.gg, and so after the raid, I'm able to very easily tell how many of the channels that we kicked as a group, and then also who did the most kicks. So you basically get like raid bonus points if you kick them according to the Wipefest score, because it gives everybody a score based on how well you did mechanics. And spoiler, dying is the ultimate like penalty, so we want to avoid that. Let's see. So once the treants are dead, the healers have to heal them up to 100%. Once they do, the treants will run to the middle where there is I'm calling it a fire hydrant, it's actually a seed, but they will start pumping energy into the fire hydrant, which will basically fill it full of water. And then we will have 3 different teams of 3 people that, again, Fated has already decided on, of people who will act as firemen to start putting out the fire that is rapidly spreading around the room. We really only need to focus on the stuff that's in like the immediate circle, because everything else on the edge of the room doesn't really matter. We're going to be doing the phase 2 of this fight in the middle of the room, and honestly we only need like one large pizza slice of the room done, but I think we'll have enough time and resources to be able to clear a lot. The other thing here is that he spawns this Scorchling Bramblethorn. So the Scorching Bramblethorn will basically lock onto certain players and try to root them and deal damage to them. We have to kill the Scorching Bramblethorn, again, super high priority. Once the Bramblethorn dies, and this is even higher priority than the treants, because this is the raid wipe protection mechanic. So burn down the Bramblethorn, and in Heroic, the only way that you can deal damage to the Bramblethorn is once somebody who is a firefighter has doused it with water. So again, if you're a firefighter during this part and somebody calls out Bramblethorn, immediately start looking for it so you can put it out with the water. Once it's been put out, damage it down, get it down to 0, and then healers will need to heal it up to 100% as quickly as possible. Once that happens, it creates a safety zone where the boss will then pulse 3 waves of damage. If we're not standing in the safety zone, whether because we're out of range or because it hasn't spawned up yet, we will wipe. The next part is that he spawns these kind of like, I don't even know what they're called, like a flower design on the ground. Dodge them. However, there will be tiny orbs that we need to soak, so they're just little personal soaks that happen at the same time. Let's see, and then the bramble will happen again, I believe. The intermission will happen when he hits 35%. He does a big suck toward himself, kind of like Sarkareth does at the during his intermission. So really just avoid getting pulled into a fire puddle, but otherwise also avoid getting within 3 meters of him, because if you do, he deals a lot more damage if you're like right underneath him. So after the big suck, he will put wait, I'm losing my track. I get 2 of the bosses confused pretty often. Let's see. Oh yeah, he puts heal absorbs on people that need to be taken off. So again, the heal absorbs will last for 8 seconds, and if they're not taken off, then it will stun everyone in an AoE radius around that person. And then likewise, fire tornadoes will spawn that we need to dodge, but otherwise this is just a damage phase. We're just burning them down. There's also a cone mechanic that he does on the tanks. The tanks cannot dodge it, but they it's a swap mechanic, right? So it puts a debuff on you. The debuff also makes it so that you cannot heal the tank. So if you're a healer trying to heal a tank and their health bar isn't moving, that's why. However, the tank can leech life from nearby enemies, so if that happens and the tank calls for it, try to group up on the tank if you can, because that's the only way that they're not going to get wrecked. Any questions? Cool. Naimu is next. I went from really hating this fight to like almost liking this fight. So again, Fated, thank you so much. We are going to have a lot of groups for this one. And it looks like my edits didn't save, so I will make that change real quick. So we're going to have 5 different groups for this portion, for the soaking of the... let's see if I have them written down. Yeah, okay, I didn't actually put the circles here, but this is going to be how we're going to orient ourselves as a group during this phase. So during this phase, the most important mechanic is that these grass patches will spawn that need to be soaked. The patches deal raid-wide damage as long as they're up. They last for 60 seconds unless you stand in them. The more people that stand in them, the quicker they disappear. So if possible, 1 or ideally 2 or 3 people should stand in those flower patches to soak them and get them down. You don't really take damage for standing in them, so just it's more of a positioning thing than a damage thing. If there are any more than like 4 of the flowers up at any one time, it'll probably deal too much raid-wide damage for us to be able to heal through. The other mechanic here is the ley lines that are on the ground. So you all probably know or remember this, but when you cross an active ley line without standing on a patch of like safety grass, which we'll talk about later, you take a short dot. And that doesn't really matter for the first 1 or 2 lines that you cross, but if you start like just running all the way across the stage, you will die instantly. So the goal of spreading everybody out like this is to make sure that we have the ability to soak all of the flowers without having to cross too many lines. Again, flowers are #1 priority, even over DPS. And then the other main mechanic here that we really have to watch out for is these lines that the boss creates that go outward that both deal a lot of damage and stun you for like 3 seconds. So make sure that while you are soaking the flowers, you are also dodging these lines. The lines may not kill you immediately, however, they will during the bomb soak mechanic. So while this phase is happening, multiple players, including the tank, will get a bomb placed on them. This is where we drop the bombs. Tanks will drop the bombs closest to the back wall. Melee will drop them 1 position closer to the raid from that. And then ranged will drop them in this pattern in the back. The only reason you don't want to do it straight across is because people will be standing kind of where the V is in the middle. Because flowers will soak there. So the bomb will deal a little bit of damage to whoever it explodes on. It will create a circle of impassable terrain, very similar to the Monk's Ring of Peace. So you know that's why we don't want to put them where we're going to need to be walking. And it also puts a very heavy dot on whoever it exploded on, where they take 100% more damage for like 30 seconds or something ridiculous. So if you get a bomb put on you, you'll probably be okay. Just be very careful not to also then immediately get hit by one of these lines, because you will absolutely die. When you get the bomb placed on you, once it explodes, you also get one of those cool little flower buffs that makes it so you can walk across the ley lines freely for a few seconds. So once you drop your bomb, just run back into position and you don't have to worry about the ley lines. However, when you're running out, you do have to worry about the ley lines, so just don't go crazy with it. Then we go into the second phase where 2 giant treants will spawn at the edge of the map. This is where we're going to be splitting the raid group in half, so 1 tank each. I'm going to be solo healing on this one, I think. The other 2 healers will be in the other group, and then a mix of DPS. The only major mechanic here is that the treants cannot be tanked to walk over the ley lines, or it'll be an instant wipe. But other than that, they deal a frontal cone, and then after they deal their cone, they spawn flowers that need to be soaked, just like in phase 1. So if it spawns near the ad and you're a melee, just go over there. If you are ranged, same thing. Boom. I'm so glad I made this an illustrated example. The only other mechanic here is that he puts out the same kind of flower pattern of ground damage as the last boss we talked about. So don't stand in those. And again, the ley lines will be active during this portion, so make sure that you do not cross, like make sure you're not running around like crazy during this phase, because that will deal more damage than the treants deal. The treants also pulse damage that increases with time, so if we take a long time to burn them down, we will wipe just to the pulsing damage. The only mechanic I didn't illustrate here is when this phase begins, the tanks will each get a buff applied to them that causes them to create like a carpet of flowers that spawns wherever they run. You just want to follow your tank to the treant because that way you will not take damage from ley lines. Any questions? Cool. Smolderon. Okay. So apparently Smolderon is both very easy mechanically and very difficult in practicality, so let's see how this goes.
Yep.
So again, we're going to be taking him to the edge of the room. If you'll notice, every single freaking map in this raid is the exact same. Well, I guess with the exception of Volacross. And I actually skipped Volacross, I'm sorry. That is my bad. We'll do that real quick. Volacross is dead simple. Giant snake in the middle of the room. Everybody splits up into 2 groups. We then do group soaks that then create fire puddles that have to basically not be touched. People will also get personal pools placed on them. You want to run those. You want to bait them, actually. You can't run them. You have to bait them close to the puddles. That's this mechanic. So that's when you try to you basically want to stand as close to the fire puddles as you can, unless you get a ring of damage around you. The way that this damage ring works is that it starts dealing very little damage, but as the ring gets smaller around you, it deals more damage. So if it touches anybody else while it's about to expire, it'll kill them. So just take it out, and you can take it out any which direction you want. Just make sure it's not overlapping anybody. And then obviously the tail will slam, one side then the other side, repeat. And while the tail slams, if you get slammed by the tail, you will die. Watch out for the shadow, which will tell you where the tail will slam. And then it will also expunge these these lava blobs that will roll across the stage. So just stand in between them. And other than that, that's it. We just walk across the stage as each one of a group, and it's really just kind of a DPS check at that point. I guess the other mechanic that I didn't illustrate here is that after we do the group soak, Volacross will put out a massive raid-wide damage on everybody individually. So that's when it looks like he's like spitting at everybody. That is when you want to save your defensives, because at a certain point, the healers are not going to be able to heal all the way through it. By themselves, anyway. All right. And again, Faded will be calling out all these mechanics of soak, get ready for raid wide, use defensive, stuff like that. Okay, we are now on Smolderon. Cool. Oh, sorry. Anybody have any questions for Volacross? I feel like that boss is kind of free. Cool. Yeah, it's just a damage and health check. Okay, Smolderon. So Smolderon, we take him to the side of the room, and we go around the room clockwise. During this phase, there will be these, let's see, remind myself what's happening here. I made almost all of these today, so things are kind of bleeding over. Let's see. Yeah, so I think, does anybody know what these... I know the bomb mechanic, but I'm trying to make sure I know what this is. I think they're just puddles that drop. Yeah, so basically the boss will drop lava puddles behind him as you move him around the room. The only time tanks you need to move the boss is when he forces you to, by spawning too many lava puddles under your feet, and then you'll just kind of inch him forward. So that's all that mechanic is. But otherwise everybody just groups up in front of him and we walk around the room. The main mechanic for this is a 50-50 bomb split. So half the players in the raid will get a personal bomb, and the other half will not. If you do not get a personal bomb, you are responsible for soaking with the tank. It'll be a giant soak circle, and then tank, once you get your help and getting soaked there, you will have a bomb put on you that you need to run away from the group, because the bomb deals damage based on distance from the raid group. So everybody who does not have a personal tanks or soaks, and then after the explosion from the soak goes out, the tank runs out basically as far as you can. For everyone else who has the personal, when you drop your puddle, it will spawn like crap on the side of the room that you don't want to clutter under our feet. So make sure you run to the edge of the room wherever you are. And the damage here is not very high, so you can actually stack up with one other person if that tends to work out for you. So don't stress about overlapping these too much. Just don't all stack up at once. Let's see. And then some players will spawn lava pools underneath them. You want to group these together because if everyone's spread out while these spawn, it will very quickly overwhelm the room, and there's no way to wipe these. There's no way to like clear them from the room. So that's why everybody, including range, is going to be pretty stacked the whole time. When he goes into intermission, once he hits 0 energy, he will then do a knock back mechanic. So just make sure that your back is not to a fire puddle. And then he goes into his big energy phase. So I had to read up on this one to make sure I understood. So obviously dodge the fire rings, easy enough, but during this phase, everybody will get 5 orbs that only you can see. Everybody needs to run around like crazy to soak those orbs. For every orb you absorb, you get a massive buff, like a DPS or HPS increase. It's like a 20% buff for each orb. And for every orb that hits him, he gets a buff for like raid-wide damage. So soak all 5 of your orbs, dodge the fire rings, and then burn down the boss. If he's still alive at the end of this, I believe that the phases restart and the room is wiped of fire. But I'm not 100%. Okay, any questions here? Cool. Last 2 bosses. Tindril. This boss was really overwhelming until I like really started to dissect it, and now it's not too bad. So everybody knows there are 3 different platforms. The good news is that the strategy for one platform will work for all the platforms. So this is how we're going to start. Drag him to the edge of the room. The tanks will be in front of him, and the rest of the raid group will be behind him. Tanks will spawn, 4 different poison mushrooms will spawn. The tanks have to alternate which mushrooms they grab, so one tank will grab mushroom 1 and 3, the second tank will grab mushrooms 2 and 4 that spawn. If you do not do them in that order, it will kill the tank. The other mechanic is where 2 things happen at the same time. Everybody will get a root that roots you, and those are ones that we all take into the boss so that we can AoE burn them down. During this phase, there are 2 ways to kill the roots. You can either use a movement freeing ability like Tiger's Lust, or you can kill it with damage. So again, AoE is going to be pretty high priority here because not everybody has a root to spell. Likewise, at the same time, 3 different people will get a debuff that it makes it so that whenever they lose the debuff, they spawn a massive fire pool underneath them. So while this happens, whoever healers or priests or whoever has a root debuff, dispel on you, try to notice which players get this additional debuff on them that's going to spawn this fire puddle, because those people need to be liberated from the roots as quickly as possible so they can run them out. So all you have to do there is run them backwards, we're going to start creating an impassable path just like we did in the last boss, but then once you get dispelled, make sure that you run back in, and that's it, easy peasy. The black, and sorry, I didn't really talk about my color mechanics here, but red is a mechanic to avoid. Black is a puddle that stays on the ground. Yellow is a soak, or yellow or green is a soak. I'm colorblind. And then white usually denotes some kind of a shield or safety zone. Okay, so after we drop the puddles, there will be a large meteor kind of thing that hits the ground. Do not stand in that. It's not a soak. And then after that happens, it will spawn these I don't even know. They're just like other dodgeable mechanics that go out. They're basically fire tornadoes that form out and run out from the center of where the explosion was. So it'll make the fight pretty chaotic, but just make sure that you're dodging those. And then after that, that's when all of the feathers spawn. So grab a feather, hop on your dragon, fly into the air. Once that happens, I didn't make a slide for this because the website doesn't let me use more than one map at a time. But it basically, if you're confident in your dragon riding abilities, try to run through all of the green orbs, because the first person to run through a green orb gives the entire team a buff. And then if you run through the green orb after that, you get a lot of your vigor back, which means you can fly more quickly to the platform. If you're not very confident in your abilities, just focus on avoiding the red orbs, because the red orbs not only deal damage to you, but they also cause you to lose 3 points of vigor. So pretty big deal. Once you land, and the priority is to get to the platform as quickly as humanly possible, he starts charging a 30-second shield that we just have to DPS down. After that, we go into the phase 2 mechanic. So the phase 2 mechanic uses the same mechanics as the first phase, but they're now in a different order. So in the first phase, it was mushrooms that spawned that the tanks had to deal with, and then it was the roots and the fire puddles. In this phase, it is the mushrooms and the roots that spawn at the same time, and then it is the fire puddles that spawn separately. So if you see that a tank gets rooted, either burn down their root or free them as quickly as possible so they can soak the mushrooms, and then it's just the regular dispel after that. This section also adds a new mechanic where a bunch of seedlings will spawn on the ground that have to be stepped on in order to be killed. For every seedling that is not destroyed by walking over it, it will spawn an ad that will hurt a lot. So number one priority for this phase is not damage, it is stepping on the seeds. And then likewise, the last thing here is, oh, Dahlia, you don't need the crest. I just requested that people have any crafted piece. You can pump it full of crest later. So once again, we go into an intermission where you grab a feather and we do the flying phase again. And then it's actually just a repeat of the two we just did. So you can see down here in phase 1 and phase 3, that's when the fire columns will spawn. And in phase 2 and phase 3, that's when the mushroom stomping, wherever it is, will happen. So phase 1 is just these 3 mechanics. Phase 2 is those 3 mechanics plus mushrooms that we need to step on. And then phase 3 is everything we just dealt with at the same time. So you'll be stepping on the seedlings while dodging fire columns. And that is it. Questions, comments? Cool. All right, last up, boy, I hope we get there tonight, Farak. All right, I love this fight. Okay, so when the fight starts, fire puddles will spawn on this corner of the room that are not negotiable. Tanks will start by spawning by facing the boss toward these puddles, and everyone else will be behind the boss. 3 players at a time will get a puddle dropping mechanic that you need to run through the boss to put anywhere along the existing fire puddles. It doesn't really matter where you put it because the fire puddles will increase in size as the fight goes along, and they'll be swallowed up anyway, but just don't let them drop on the raid team. The new heroic mechanic is something you've probably seen if you were watching the Race to World first, which is these giant lines that get put on 2 players at a time for a total of 8 players per cycle. It's not a huge deal if you happen to get clipped by one of these when it pops, when it explodes, but you do not want to be standing on more than like